there is a thing of like, what is the rigor at which the argument is true? So one of the things you can think about and Wittgenstein, when Wittgenstein wrote his first piece of work and sent it in to his advisor said, the amazing thing about this is there's nothing in this work that's wrong. So you can think about that. It took Wittgenstein to write a paper where nothing is wrong. And one of the things academia can help, of course, the disaster we have in modern academia is essentially you're learning a religion. But if you were learning academia, the rigor at which an argument or a concept could theoretically be true is a real rigor.
Alex Karp just exposed the biggest flaw in modern academia. This is a must-watch.
Not even that you're right, but that you're not wrong. Okay. And I think, like, obviously there's a translation function when most people at Palantir are not particularly interested in having a lecture on Heidegger when they ask me how we should, like for my feedback, which honestly they don't always ask for, and often don't listen to. Like, we have Palantirians here; they'll attest to that. We do not have a culture where people follow my orders inherently, but I can mostly convince them. But the rigor of, is this plausibly true, is a rigor that I got at home because the other thing is like, because also interacting and negotiating with two highly intelligent, unusual and difficult people, my parents, and trying to get my way is really hard and builds up a lot of skills that, and this is why I think partner selection, by the way, is crazy important, because you want children.
In business or romance or both?
In everything. Because you need like the rigor of how do you convincing my parents of something, even if I was wrong and they were right, is very hard. So that sets a standard. But then that standard is high, and it's just like convincing a world-class professor who's not politically biased, so the kind of people you have roaming around here, of something is actually hard. And it's that rigor that actually sets the standard for doing important things in any part of life. And here, where I completely agree with my parents, and it sounds like, I have this thing where I'm interested in things that are true but not plausible. So this is a true but not plausible statement. I really believe doing something important is crucially important for fulfillment, so that part's true and plausible. And I don't believe that the money part of it is more valuable. You just need enough money so you don't have to think about money. And if you stay off meth and you live below your means, you'll have enough money for that, probably. And so, but then it's like, how do I do something important with my life? And the rigor of what it means to be plausibly right, certainly not wrong, is a skill that will save your life in your career and in your personal life over and over and over again.
Success isn't about always being right. It's about being resilient enough to challenge your own thinking and improve. That's why Palantir's leadership isn't about dictating ideas, but about fostering an environment where only the strongest arguments survive. In a world where so many companies are driven by conformity, this kind of intellectual rigor is what sets Palantir apart.
That was an unintentional segue to your book, because what the book is about, I think the premise of the book is about how Silicon Valley is full of some of the brightest, cleverest minds in the world, and they are focused inordinately on building things to make our lives slightly more luxurious and better, on apps and social and things that will be forgotten, and they're unmoored from a broader national project. Tell us a little bit more about that thesis, and more to the point, how that happened. How did if the pretext of the book is Silicon Valley lost its way, and you could look at something like the Manhattan Project, the marriage there between tech and government as the high watermark. And then we'll talk about Doge and maybe how Doge is trying to remarry those two things. But how did Silicon Valley lose its way and become unmoored from a sense of having a sense of purpose beyond really the market and beyond these little companies? How did it become unmoored from a sense of a broader commitment to America and the West?
Well, there's a lot to that question, and it's, I think, it I don't know exactly where to begin, but
Start with what it should look like.
well, I think, and again, this is where I'm super into academia still. The classic positivist way to look at the world is that, you know, you'll have something like the value of an object will be measured by the market, and the value of the object will have, its value will correspond. It'll be something called Pareto optimality, which I'm sure you guys spend time thinking about here.
Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah, they love that. This is a conservative school. But it's basically the market is fair, and I believe that, and there's an AI riff on this, but I think that true talent, management of talent. So let me do the management of talent for you. How do you avoid becoming a sophist, successful person who's super unhappy? Which should be like, let's assume everyone here can be successful. It's I think you want to do endeavors that are larger than yourself, that are more meaningful than yourself, and where that endeavor probably can't be fully monetized.
Why did tech go from moonshots to micro-optimizations? Somewhere along the way, solving fundamental problems took a back seat to engagement metrics and ad revenue. But when you look at Palantir, SpaceX, or even Tesla, you see companies trying to reclaim that original spirit, leveraging tech not just for profit, but for something bigger. That's the kind of thinking Silicon Valley should return to.
And some people have that in their personal life. Some people have that in their professional life. I'm pretty skeptical. This is where of the idea that the market is rational, and that the market will price things in terms of their true value. And so, it was better for our society, and ergo better for everyone in the society, to have our most technical people building things that were both good for government and good for society. But it's much more difficult, and it's much more dangerous to build them. And then again, I think what's in the book that I think our educational institutions have really done us a disservice. One of the reasons I wanted to come here was, and what is that disservice? Well, the primary disservice was somehow teaching people that it's better to believe in nothing than into something. Whatever that something is. Like, what you're really learning at an elite school is the world is already understandable, and you should just follow this preordained arc. And that preordained arc has a set of steps where you say you believe in something, but actually you believe in your self-advancement. And then I think what happened in Silicon Valley, by the way, there's been, again, testament to America, a huge shift. I think, it's like, and that's partly because the ideas changed, but quite frankly, somewhat ill-modestly, it's because Palantir did so well, and now other companies are doing very well, and people see, well, I can do something that has a higher purpose and make money. And that, again, I'm not arguing for a non-free enterprise, because if you couldn't make money building Palantir or other defense tech startups, the idea would be an idea they study in some faculty by people who can't get a job. And but I think we went way too far on this. We are going to build things in the easiest way possible.
Silicon Valley didn't just lose its sense of purpose, it was trained out of it. The modern education system prioritizes credentialism over conviction, so we end up with brilliant minds chasing incremental gains instead of tackling fundamental challenges. That's why Palantir's success is so important. It proves that working on hard, meaningful problems isn't just possible, it's profitable.
And those things are at the margin going to be detrimental for our society. But the other way academia really screwed us was, I think it's very hard to build things if you don't have a hierarchical notion of what's good and bad. Like, why would you build something for the U.S. and our nation if all nations are equal? Or our nation is worse than other nations? Why would you take the risk and the effort to build something hard and difficult you might fail at that would advance our defense if you're defending if our culture and the people we're defending ourselves against are as good, as rational, as moral, as likely to behave rationally, as willing to protect the rights of various groups that have received discrimination? Why would you do that? And the obvious answer is you would only do that if you're a zealot or insane, and that's why the reaction to us in the beginning was so negative, because like we were calling into question the very hierarchy of norms, meaning non-hierarchy of norms, that powered the decisions people were making. And then you could ask, getting to these, why have we had such a corrosion of legitimacy into like, one of the things I like to ask people who in private rooms who are defending things I don't think are defensible, and I ask these people, okay, I'm a kind of reformed, old school liberal progressive who's very unhappy and now had to leave like the Democratic Party and whatever, but I ask them in private, name an institution that's run by the things you believe in that actually works. Any institution where works is less is put into the system that goes out. And the answer always is basically, I don't accept your frame. Which is, by the way, one of the most disingenuous, like the number of times because I love to have these fights kind of in private rooms where people can be more honest. I like that. And I try and run into very famous people. And I ask them about like all sorts of things, like how can you possibly accept, my favorite rant obviously is, you built a party or an institution, universities, other universities. The primary focus of universities in the last 20 years has been anti-discrimination.
If all nations are equal, why should anyone take the risk of building something to defend their own? This is the fundamental issue with the relativist mindset. It erodes ambition and responsibility. The reality is, not all nations operate under the same moral framework, and not all institutions function with the same level of competence. When academia conditions the best minds to believe their own country isn't worth prioritizing, it's no surprise that talent drifts toward trivial endeavors instead of meaningful innovation. The cost of this mentality isn't just stagnation, it's vulnerability.
Good. I'm not in favor of non-meritocratic discrimination, nor is anyone I've ever met, like in favor of discrimination. Okay, well, if you're so not in favor of discrimination, how can you accept discrimination against a people that has the longest history of discrimination in the history of humanity? And the answer is, I don't accept your frame. If you're like, okay, well, how can you possibly tacitly defend Hamas? I don't accept your frame. How can you explain that, I quoted, like, judge them by the fruits they bear. How can you explain your ideology where there's not a single institution that you can say in private, no one's putting you on the spot in public, that you believe is actually working by the very basic standard that you put in 2 units out, you get 2.5. You put in 2 units, you get out more than 2 units. And the answer is, I don't accept your frame. And now, what's fascinating to me and is in the book is, in most cases, it's because they're doing this thing that you will encounter everywhere in your life, and something that academia, and I think actually my book can help protect against, which is they are actually a product of some ideology. They become a product of some ideology that presupposes a universalistic, undiscussable presupposition behind which there's a grift. And that presupposition that they will not allow, that it becomes religious in the sense that you cannot problematize it in academic language, and not academic language would be discuss it, creates a system where the dysfunction of the institution does not matter because the dysfunction cannot be discussed outside the frame which they defined, which cannot be called into question. And the whole institution is sinking, and you still can't mention it. And this is like, And this is, I think, what classic education prevents. It prevents you from becoming the product.
What's happening in academia and many elite institutions is more than just ideological blindness, it's structural failure. The refusal to challenge certain ideas creates an intellectual echo chamber where incompetence thrives. In this environment, questioning the system isn't just discouraged, it's treated as dangerous. This explains why institutions that were once centers of innovation and leadership have become stagnant, unable to produce meaningful advancements. The irony is that these same institutions claim to be dedicated to progress while systematically ensuring that no real progress is made. Without the ability to recognize and reward actual competence, they're setting themselves up for long-term irrelevance.